Hello. I wanted to share a few thoughts around misunderstandings or misconceptions around spiritual awakening. Some of them which I recognized quite early on in this process, some of them I learned a little bit later in the process, and they may well be relevant to you if you are awakening to yourself. Um, One of the things I would say firstly is that awakening does not fix all your problems. This is quite a big misunderstanding. And it was quickly shown to me that waking up doesn't remove my issues or challenges. Um, it's not going to get rid of your problems. And instead, it's a process of peeling back illusions that mask life as it is, that mask the truth of reality. And I say illusions now because I can see now that they're only real in my mind, holding on to these beliefs and ideas that I've repeated for so long that they seem very, very real, they're very rigid. And so instead of fixing problems, it was the beginning to seeing my deep rooted fear of being disliked or my lack of self worth or inadequacy and insecurity and how those things would play out in behavior. So, really, it provides an opportunity to actually work towards really understanding what's under all that stuff that we all accumulate. And in this, we noticed that difficulties and challenges are part of our unique life paths. They're part of the game of life. And so, whilst they don't disappear, we grow in our capacity to embrace them. And secondly, awakening is the end of the spiritual path. And the opposite is true, it's the beginning. Um, but like I said in a previous video, the moment for me in 2010 where it felt like I was so aggressively shaken and forced to see, it definitely didn't feel spiritual. Everyone's going to have a different experience of this. It was very humbling for me, it was very heavy. But there was no choice other than to look at the life I was leading. And so it was the beginning of the journey. And amongst many avenues that I've explored over the years, different meetups, ecstatic dances, plant ceremonies, retreats, meditation groups. I met many people who talked of their desire to get there, to become awakened, like there was some holy grail, and it can definitely feel like that. My understanding of this, what was that is awakening, enlightenment, illumination. That's it, the land of milk and honey. I remember one guy tell me during an ayahuasca ceremony that he'd sat with this plant medicine over 100 times. And this is his journey. There's no judgments, but it does lead you to question. But I learned very quickly that awakening is being awake to my life, and life is the initiation always. And once you decide, it's the beginning of this journey of letting go of the attachments and dissolving the patterns that actually keep us bound and restrict us from experiencing this sense of spiritual freedom. And on my journey, I can see how this moment of awakening was true, was real, and not just some fabrication of my egoic desire, because it showed me that there is so much inner work to do than I could ever imagine. Um, and this awakening does not give you everything that you want. I think that's also a common misconception that instead of awakening giving you more things, it takes away everything that's not true. So these attachments, these ideas. And I thought becoming more spiritual would give me my life purpose. So in the middle of this process I've been on the past 15 years, I became very, very spiritual. The idea that I had of being spiritual, lots of hot yoga, becoming vegan, having my hair in a bun. Um, but yeah, even things like money and a purpose and things I value, which I thought would give me value as well, material things and people. Um, and so instead of gaining more things, this awakening process takes things away. It's actually beginning to show me that nothing actually belongs to me anyway. And less is more when it comes to natural expression. But yeah, more on that topic later because I think it's really juicy. This letting go of the need to be somebody can allow this beautiful universal expression to come through all of us. An awakening is definitely not love and light and peace and positivity, which again, I was never thinking about these things, but the connotations are very clear that this is all about illumination and flowing clothing, white linen. But really, it's about seeing things a little more clearly, reality that I'm not able to see before when we have this mask, this veil over. And so this is not all positive. Yes, parts of our reality and parts of my reality were positive, or what we can call as positive. This is again some evaluation, judgment of the mind, but mostly I was seeing pain and challenge and suffering, things I didn't want to. But there's no pretending anymore. The eyes actually become open to reality as it is, the full spectrum of being human as a spiritual being. And so trying to bypass this and behaving in a way that's not encompassing of this full spectrum, that's the work of the ego. And the ego, where I notice, actually controls how we feel based on judgments and attachments to how things should be. But as we awaken, it's actually more freeing to feel and live exactly how you are. So this is about expanding out from the narrow confines of the ego, which wants what it wants, and developing this capacity to be with what is exactly how it is. And lastly, just to wrap up these misconceptions and misunderstandings, what I noticed is that this notion that awakening does all of the work for you, and instead it's more like a light being shined on your mess. But the light, of course, shows you the mess, but it's up to you to take action. And this is a slow process. As I reflecting now, can see that I was not shown all of this mess at once. This would have been too overwhelming, and I don't know if I would have been able to handle it. But over the time, I'm learning about myself on a more subtle level. The really intricate and sneaky elements of the ego require the more obvious things to be cleaned up first. You've got to move all of that heavy baggage that's obscuring the more subtle and finer pieces to surrender and to what I saw. It took time and learning, and those more obvious things at the beginning, this real false bravado, the loud mouth, quite spiteful, making fun of others. So that was one of the first things I saw, how I'd hurt other people with my words, trying to have some identity on that. This would have been very obvious to people around me, but not to me because I was so wrapped up in myself. Fast forward, let's say 10 years, and the work was on my relationship to my mother and my need for this validation, the still present need for external validation to feel worthy because I didn't receive this when I was younger. And so what I noticed was that this inner energy that's awakening and allowing me to face myself becomes more intelligent, less attached, less forceful, more compassionate, more loving, more allowing. And then this allows me to see more subtle truths, perhaps more painful from one perspective, because I've built this inner strength to be with these more painful emotions and sensations that arise when confronting these things. So I hope that's been useful. Some misunderstandings. If you have any more, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. And for now, peace.